Hello and welcome to a new episode of BIMvoice. Today we talk again with Gavin Crump, a BIM consultant, the well-known Aussie Bim Guru from Australia. Hi Gavin, how are you doing?
Hi, I'm really well, Petru. It's good to be back on the show. It's been a little while since our last one, so I think it's great to come back, and it's good to see that you're well as well. You're recovering well as well, so I'm pleased to see that, and I look forward to discussing a lot of things that have probably happened and developed since the last time that we spoke about all things BIM.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. I was really looking forward to catch up a little bit.
Yeah, me too.
I did not mention something actually, and something quite important change in your career, and that's it. That you started teaching at the University of Sydney.
Yeah.
Let's start by telling us a little bit about that. But first, for the ones who did not listen to the first episode, who are you?
I guess to catch everyone up to me, I guess not everyone knows who I am. That'd be quite presumptuous to assume they know me. So my name is Gavin Crump. I've worked in Australia for my whole life. I've got an architectural background and I've worked for about 10 years in AEC. I currently work in Sydney, Australia, and I've worked my way through various BIM roles from a technician up to a coordinator to a manager. Started with more of an architectural focus and eventually found my way more towards a BIM management style focus, where I was focused more on building BIM systems, BIM workflows, maintaining the BIM standards and systems in companies, which led me eventually to become a consultant when I realized I wanted to help more than just one company at once, I guess. As you said, some people know me as the Aussie Bim Guru. So that was a YouTube channel, which I launched just over 2 years ago now. I think it turned 2 about a week ago. And that's been just an amazing journey, a way to sort of expose my ideas to the global industry. And also just to expose myself to the global industry and get a lot of opinions and ideas and meet lots of great people such as yourself that I guess I wouldn't have really known otherwise. It's a great way to just network, and I highly encourage anyone else to consider just putting themselves out there if they really want to, accelerate their career and just who they are in the industry. But I guess that's me in a nutshell for now. Yeah, but lots more to come. And as you said, I've just started teaching as well. So I guess that's been a really interesting experience. So I got approached by a well-known friend in Sydney who used to teach an elective in BIM. In this case, they call BIM Building Information Management, whereas I guess I'm more used to it being Building Information Modeling, but there is a bit of ambiguity over what BIM stands for and what it represents. So I sort of took this opportunity because he was getting quite busy with his own consulting business. And I've always been really keen to educate university students because that's obviously the best way to really set up the people of tomorrow, I guess, is to go back to them before they, really step out into the industry. So I teach what's called a Capstone Unit. So this is sort of one of the last electives they'll take before they graduate. So typically this gives them a few sort of mini projects they can use to contextualize their degree. So in this case, I work mostly with Masters of Architecture students, some of which have professional experience as well. Most of them are local in Australia. A few of them are international, so actually remotely studying from other nations. And it's just been a really interesting way for me to sort of package everything that I know about BIM from a process, a software, a delivery perspective, and also just contextualize it in an educational environment. And to also take a step back and realize how hard it can be to teach BIM from the ground up to people that really haven't heard about it before. And it's given me more techniques I can use that really help me just deal with everyday people, clients, in just trying to explain this 3-letter acronym that has a lot going behind it. So yeah, it's great. It's been a good experience.
How much time do you use for this?
It's not too bad actually. It's sort of like an intensive course where I manage a little website for the university for the course where people can do discussion boards and quizzes. And we meet for 5 contact days. 3 of them are sort of heavily lecture focused and 2 of them are heavily tutorial focused. One challenge is it's a remote unit. So I have been teaching people via the Zoom platform, which is a very different way to teach. I'm hoping next year it'll be in person. But I guess behind the scenes, there's a lot of fingers crossed everything stays good. It's looking a bit better now. But I guess behind the scenes, I've been sort of reworking the entire curriculum, modernizing it, so including a lot of concepts in there like IFC and openBIM that weren't necessarily captured in the previous curriculum. So I've been showing them things like BIM Vision and BIM Collab and some of those tools that can sort of open up the way that they use software. So not necessarily just using Revit and ArchiCAD and some of the more closed platforms. And also refocusing BIM as a process, not just, I guess, a modeling process, but more than that. So how we use information, how that information goes on to become digital twins sometimes, and also how information is briefed successfully. So I've been showing them the Planoly platform, so the BIM management platform. So that's been a great way to show them that, if you don't ask the right questions, you'll never get the right answer. And also if the client doesn't have the right questions, sometimes we need to ask them those questions too. So it's been a good way to sort of just get them thinking more about, I guess, the reality of BIM that they're probably going to encounter as well, that it's not all just fun modeling and, building families. It's so much more than that. So it's been a great opportunity, but it's about 5 days, but behind the scenes, it's probably about a good month of curriculum development, I would say, has went into it, with the idea that I'll be able to run this course a few times throughout the years.
Interesting.
But it's a pretty significant time investment, but high reward as well. Yeah.
Yeah, it's very important. It's very important preparing the future generations that will they will have a huge advantage when they will have already something a fundament, right? The fundamentals of this from the university. And yeah, that's very, very nice. They have something that they can build up on afterwards, right?
Yeah, I've tried to essentially give them like a head start almost, to make sure that they know all the things that they're not going to have to just find out through consequence or through trial and error or through making mistakes and then finding out later, oh, this was a better way to approach BIM even as a concept. So I've tried to give them that 3 to 4 year head start on what we already have, so that they can reach where we are faster, so they can go beyond where we are now. And I guess their new perspectives and their new ways of thinking, and ideally just pioneer the next steps in BIM. Because I find that, whilst we do still obviously take steps ourselves, I do notice that the youth really are, the next frontier of pushing development through and questioning the status quo and saying, why do we do things this way and should we do them this way and do we have to do them this way is probably the most valuable question I hear them ask. And I say, well, that sounds like you're going to be an entrepreneur and you're going to go against the grain. I already have a few students that are asking those sort of questions, which is great. And I have to tell them, I say, maybe you'll found the next big company that makes the new platform or, just pioneers a new process, the next BIM, whatever that will be. So it's really great to just get those fresh perspectives and also just to revisit my own perspectives on BIM. And sort of find that opportunity to question my own presumptions and sort of put it in a bigger context, not only globally, but also from a more software agnostic perspective as well. So not just necessarily focusing on the platforms that I use, but going beyond them. And that's been a really great way to sort of ground my own understanding as well. So yeah, it's been really rewarding, and it's definitely something I recommend that a lot of professionals consider once they've worked for a while, just to sort of keep them, I guess, aware of that bigger picture. Besides just working on projects every day, there's a whole another generation right behind us, and they're very thirsty for knowledge. So yeah, it's been great. Yeah.
And they made a great choice. They poached the right person. Who can be better than somebody that has over 10,000 subscribers and has taught so many people?
It is good having the YouTube channel because I can just send them videos sometimes if they have certain questions. They just say, oh, I'd like to know more about this, and I say, oh, I've got 3 videos on it. One of them asked about studying BIM as a tertiary thing, so going beyond this, and I said, oh, I've got a video literally talking about that, and it's really cool. I mean, hopefully they don't see me as too much of a celebrity. I guess it'd be a bit a bit crazy if they saw me like that way, but I do meet people now though, which is a bit strange in the workplace. Sometimes when I go out to meet clients, sometimes there's a technician somewhere in the office and they go, it's him, and they know who I am. It's a bit strange. So I've only been stopped in the street once so far, and that was a strange experience. So I'm not like a rock star or anything like that. Yeah, I do have to remind myself I'm just making BIM videos, but
I understand, but you are a rock star, but for a very small niche, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which we are a small niche afterwards.
Yeah, like I wrote an article recently talking about my perspective as a BIM consultant talking about architects. And I had to force myself to say, I know I'm just a BIM consultant. I know BIM isn't everyone's focus in the industry. And I tried to contextualize, this small little piece of the market that we focus on so intensely, and said, I appreciate, not everyone cares about BIM. Not everyone needs it. And, some people just hate it. Like they wish it wasn't there. But I guess for me, it's my passion. And just like there's someone out there that likes dealing with bolts and steel connections, good on them. Someone has to. So I sort of put myself in the same sort of perspective. That's what makes our industry so fun, I guess. Everyone's a bit of a specialist in some regard.
Yeah. Okay. What else significant has happened since last year?
Lots
What
of
else
things,
can
actually.
you tell me?
I mean, I'm trying to think where to begin, I guess. I mean, one big change for me is that I worked as a sole trading BIM consultant for pretty much all of 2020. I launched my business around about in June is when I got busy. Between March and June was like my building, marketing, website development phase. But I would say probably around about the middle of February to early to middle of February, I did make the choice to subconsult to a larger firm of a collective of BIM consultants part-time. I did realize that as one person at Bim Guru, I could only cover so much ground. And whilst I could take on employees, I did look at the business manager role and say, there's just certain aspects of that didn't appeal to me. Like I was too far away from the tools, too far away from, programming, things that really I was quite passionate about. And whilst I could have probably, taken on employees and trained them to be like me, I sort of felt that I was probably better off joining an established collective that was already moving in a direction that I agreed with. So I was quite pleased to join a firm called Bim Consulting. They're literally called Bim Consulting, and they're in Sydney. They work with a really large architectural firm, Architectus, with a lot of people I've known for quite a while now that I have a lot of respect for. The manager of that firm, actually, he was the one that used to run the BIM course. So there was a lot of little sort of connections and benefits that came through getting to know them better. So yeah, I go in there 2 days a week and work as a sort of a lead computational designer / mentor / general consultant. And most likely will probably build up my time there, I would say, quite soon, while still trying to juggle my YouTube, some of my consulting, which I'm holding on to, and also developing a course platform and a few other avenues that keep me quite busy. So that's probably the biggest development that's happened for me. As well as that, you've probably seen that my YouTube channel is still going. I think it's at 15,000 subscribers now, so it's going quite well. Nice. So I'm seeing that's getting a lot more attention, and I'm meeting a lot of people in the industry that I respect a lot of developers and programmers, and even some architects that I wouldn't have expected to have got to know through there. And I guess as a result of that, I've also been a bit more willing to put out topics that are a little bit more controversial, more opinion based. So I've put out a video a few weeks ago that was sort of questioning the development cycles of Revit, which is a platform I use nearly on a daily basis. But I got to the point where I felt that I needed to express, that we all have a lot of trouble managing not only the software, but the versioning, non-backwards compatibility, anti-competitive business practices. So I sort of made a video out of that. And as a result, I got to talk to a lot of Autodesk from that. That was a really interesting experience. And I guess there'll be some more videos coming soon on that. So not necessarily negative videos, but more constructive videos, I would say. And also I've made my own open letter quite recently towards architects. So for those that didn't know, a lot of architects actually built an open letter about half a year ago now, I think it was, maybe a bit more, directed towards Autodesk, essentially saying that they didn't agree with their business practices. They wanted to see Revit further developed for their needs. They actually wanted to see it rewritten from the ground up. Good luck. And then they also wanted to see a lot of other things from Autodesk as architects. And I sort of had to turn the letter around on them as architects and question how they operate in their own business practices, and say, we have this saying that the pot is calling the kettle black, essentially, which is just saying, like we're just as bad as each other, but I'm gonna tell you first that the pot and the kettle are arguing, and it's like you're both the same color. Like it doesn't really matter. So, we should get our own house in order before we start, pointing fingers at, fairly successful companies. Autodesk is a very profitable company. They're making a lot of money, so they're obviously doing something right. But I guess they're just not necessarily working in our interests all the time. So there's sort of a few things that I've sort of been exploring probably over the last last few months. And of course, consulting's been very successful. I would say it's probably the most profitable year I ever had in my whole career by a long way, I'm pleased to say. So it was a great journey. I had a lot of support. A lot of my clients found me through YouTube or LinkedIn. So I mean, I couldn't have done it without leading up to that point. So yeah, it was really quite a fun year, I would say. Actually, I got to do a lot of research and development despite all the consulting work. I won't lie, consulting rates are very nice compared to working in an office sometimes. So you can take a day off here and there and do some research. So yeah, it was a really interesting year. My career's completely changed. Yeah, I guess that probably covers a few things we can probably segue to. How about yourself, I guess? What have you been sort of up to since we spoke almost a year ago? Obviously, BIMvoice has taken off a lot.
Yeah, I just kept doing the podcast.
You know how many episodes you're up to now? Or what number are you up to? Must be past the 100 mark, right?
No. I did not get.
Really?
It's only
I'll
once
send
a
you on
week.
heaps of things. Yeah.
But it's only once a week. So if I don't have 1 year yet, so there is not. I did not reach 52 yet.
It must be close to 50 if you've almost done a year. Yeah.
Yes. I will publish on Saturday the episode 47. So
Fantastic.
I'm getting.
I mean, you go very in depth on your videos too. So I always appreciate how much editing time you must have to do behind the scenes just to put all the content together as well, and all the platforms you put it across to. So I really appreciate there's a lot of work behind that for you.
Thank you very much. Actually, I have a video editor that is helping me, but yeah, I coordinate him. And sometimes there is more editing needed, sometimes not so much. Depends on the guest and on the topic. But it's been life-changing, this experience for me, from many points of views. But the most important thing here is that I met wonderful people like you, like yourself, that I learned a lot from. And I always have somebody that I can go and ask a direct question now and get an answer.
How good is that, right? It's so valuable to have that network available. It changes that you don't need to learn everything anymore, right? It's so good. You can focus on what you want to learn, but then a guy, a girl, they know what they know, and it's like having a dictionary of people. I like to say sometimes it's such an amazing thing. So I'm glad to hear you've sort of found that same benefit from this process. Has found you as well.
Yeah. And apart from this, I'm working full time. I've been blessed to have work all the time during the pandemic. Since the pandemic started, I did not have any problem with this. So I've been very busy. So the podcast is still a side project for me.
Yep.
It's helping and inspiring me all the time to go further and try more.
Yeah. Yeah, and I guess it gives you a lot of different perspectives on future projects that you might be able to bring to the way that you deliver on future projects as well, I'm sure. Like there's a lot of new tools I've sort of came across that I try to introduce to my consulting here and there when it suits. I was experimenting with BIM the other week and trying to see if I could just deliver something small using that. It was an interesting task I set myself. I have found too that just sometimes, just meeting different people that think in different ways sort of just unlocks different thought patterns in your own mind too, right? Where you start approaching problems in different ways. And I've definitely found when I talk to certain types of people on, say, Twitter, I go and focus on very different tasks after that. Like if I speak to the Dynamo developers or one of those big package managers, I tend to go and work on my own package for a bit because I'm sort of just enthused by their energy, and that sort of passes on to me. Or if someone speaks to me about, say, like IFC, I tend to jump onto OS Arch and start reading up on the schemas a bit more and understanding that process more deeply. So yeah, it's a good way to sort of get inspired from other people, I find too. Some of that enthusiasm rubs off, I find.
Yeah, especially in these times. Maybe before it was easier to get around, right? Because this is another component actually here, the social aspect.
Yes.
Outside of the work environment, right? Because through this, I had the opportunity to meet new people all the time and keep myself to learn always new things, new aspects, not only regarding BIM, but also regarding life, right? Because everybody has a different take on how they live and how they do things. And it's been very nice to have this variety from the daily routine. Waking up.
What is the spice of life, as they say? So, yeah, I agree. I mean, it was interesting, I guess, that you launched pretty much right when we were seeing a digital transformation in the industry. and also communication through what COVID forced us to do. So yeah, it was an interesting time. I think I was glad I had the channel as well, just as a way that I could outwardly communicate with people when they weren't necessarily as easily accessible. Like I had a lot of old colleagues that I didn't get to see for months, and they said, "Oh, I've been watching your videos, so I still, have a lot to talk to you about." And they'd give me calls and ask me about tutorials I was doing. So it was a good way to just keep some activity going as well. And there's been good platforms like Discord. I've been using a fair bit of Discord with friends just to keep a bit of chat going in the background and keep social. So it's been good to see some of those platforms also give us a different ways to communicate during this time. So yeah, it's been interesting for sure.
Yeah, we don't have excuses. We have so many tools out there, only to use them, right? And many of them are free to use. Many of them, right?
Speaking of free tools, I'm glad to say since last time I spoke to you, I think we briefly spoke about editing software and what we use. I'm glad to say all my editing software is now free.
Really?
Yeah, I broke away from Adobe, so no more Adobe. I have the
What
free.
are you using?
So I use DaVinci for movie editing. Love
It's
DaVinci.
perfect. It's amazing.
It's so much better than Adobe Premiere. Like I thought Adobe Premiere was good, and once I learned DaVinci, it's incredible. It's so much better. It's built for proper movie editing. Adobe, I'm not sure what they built Premiere for. It feels really weird. It's looking back at it, it just doesn't seem to function the way it should. So I was glad to use that, and then I found this really great Photoshop clone called Photopia. Which is a web-based Photoshop essentially. So anywhere you go, you can open up this web-based version and no installation required. I have no idea how they legally do it, but it's been around since 2013. So I assume there must have been some expiry on the intellectual property that Adobe reserved with a patent. It must have expired because it's essentially just a slightly less feature-driven Photoshop, really. So I do all my editing on that. InDesign, I just made better templates in Word and just stepped away from InDesign in the end. It was a bit hard because InDesign is a really good program. I did look at Affinity for a while. The Affinity was good. It just didn't quite capture some of the features I was trying. I know you were looking at Affinity for a while. I don't know if you stuck with that in the end or...
I still have it. It's one-time fee license, so I still have it. But to be honest, I don't use it too much. You know what I use? I use Canva. Canva is my go-to tool.
I did use Canva for everything. For a while.
It's amazing.
I did like Canva. Yeah, I think it was great. It's good if you have like a really solid brand that you can spread across a lot of different types of mediums. So I did quite enjoy that for a while. I found eventually I just templated myself because I'm a bit of a hopeless creative. I do like sometimes, templating myself very in a very custom manner. And I found sometimes Canva sort of held my hand too much. But I think it was great for, creatives with not much time. I could see just why that platform was so successful. I think you actually recommended that one to me. So that was a really good recommendation. Definitely recommend it for any other content creators watching that, just need some quick branding, quick graphics that, work for all different platforms. It was pretty amazing.
Yeah. And especially if you don't have experience, like a graphic designer, right? I don't have. I'm an engineer. I'm not an artist. And you find a lot of YouTube videos and free courses to learn and use it. It's very, very easy. It's very, very easy.
Yeah, it was very well supported. I had to unsubscribe from their mailings. They were so helpful. They kept sending me tips every day, I think it was. And I said, too helpful. But it's good to see they're passionate and enthusiastic. And I think for the only other free tool I really use for creative purposes is for PDF editing. I use PDF 24, which I actually got as a result of working with the D-Roots tools, where they use PDF 24 as their printing engine. And I found that was actually, it did most of the PDF functionalities I needed, like restricting access, combining PDFs, basic markups. And then I use the free Acrobat Reader just for general opening and viewing. But yeah, that pretty much covered my creative suite. So I was glad to save about $800 a year. So that was nice. I wish I'd done it from the start. I should have listened to you.
Yeah.
Because I got rid of one bit and then I thought, maybe I can get rid of this next bit. And it just became an addiction. And before I knew it, I was free. So that was a nice change.
Think about that. The next piece of this is going to be Blender BIM.
I'm not sure. I don't know if it'll be Blender BIM or we haven't seen the platform yet. It's hard to say. I'm definitely open to another platform showing up that can replace what I do right now. I think it'll be hard because I'm so entrenched in the way that Revit and Dynamo function that I've built my own sort of, and I've realized this over time, that I've built my workflows around the tools to some degree, which makes it really hard to get out of them unless you sort of abandon the ways of thinking that you sort of built in your own head. And that's the challenge with closed BIM, that you really do you sort of build your own prison sometimes a little bit in terms of the way that you work. And a lot of firms, I understand why they can't get themselves away from these platforms, because they've built their object libraries, they've built their scripts, they've built all these proprietary tools that keep them there. Because if you go away, that's it, they're gone.
Invested so much time, invested so much time and money in the people who maintain this, right? If somebody is disappearing, who is maintaining? You need,
like I've tried other closed platforms too, and it's the same challenge. Like I went to ArchiCAD for a bit just to try it out, and you know, all my objects are gone. I've got to learn GDL scripting just to build a chair. There was some huge changes,
drawbacks,
in you had to work there. And I guess BlenderBIM too is another challenge, because I guess when you take everything away, BlenderBIM is mostly and I don't want to oversimplify it, because I know Dion's going to come and send me hate mail if I do, but it's he's not that bad. I'm just joking, but I guess it's mostly like an information management tool is really what I got out of looking at BlenderBIM. It was more about classifying and structuring the data tree and the P-sets and the elements to geometry in Blender. So a huge part of it was actually learning Blender itself and how to take advantage of Blender's offering as well. So when I tried learning Blender, that was my stumbling point there, that I wasn't actually very good using Blender as it came. So that was my weakness. I think I see a lot of cool things coming out of it though. So maybe that might be the next big platform. Who knows? It's hard to say. I guess, funding, like we know, is a challenge they're currently tackling. So it could be interesting to see if it keeps going in the way it's going. There's definitely more people that are getting on the openBIM train now, that's for sure. I see a lot more talk about it. So it's good to see. And a lot of it's come through, what you've done as well. You've raised a lot of good awareness for openBIM and the merits and the benefits. So, and I'm definitely a lot more open to it than I used to be. I'll be honest, definitely. Yeah, I mean, when we first spoke, I don't think I was very, very open to open, I guess you could say. But I do see the benefit and the need for it sometimes, especially I've been using Grasshopper for Rhino a lot lately, and whilst they're not really open platforms, I've been using the Ladybug tool suites a lot, and I've come to appreciate what the Ladybug tools team managed to do by leveraging a lot of open libraries like Radiance and DaySim and some of those tools that they just couldn't have done what they did without. So it's definitely it's worthwhile. I can see the benefit. Whether the whole industry is going to be open, I'm never sure if that's going to be the case. Unless we can reframe the competitive nature of the industry, I'm not sure if it's feasible. But there's definitely a different way of working.
That won't happen anytime soon. And that's not the goal. That's not the goal. The point is to have alternative for who wants to try alternatives. That's the problem. Yeah. We don't have any. Sure. And I'm not saying, like, please understand correctly what I'm saying. BlenderBIM right now is not an alternative. It is not by any means an alternative, because it's still alpha version. But I'm saying, like, it has very good principles that is built open. Like, everything is built around open, right? And accessible for everybody, right?
And that's what matters, I guess. So I agree with you. The foundations of the platform are the important thing to get right first. So I totally appreciate that when we look at BlenderBIM, we shouldn't be looking at it like the next Revit. We should be looking at it like the concept that might lead to the next platform or the next movement, the new way of managing data. It might not just be a modeling platform. It might be a database platform. It could emerge into something very different. And just like Revit started as an idea in someone's head, so does BlenderBIM. It's like they all start somewhere. So I've always appreciated that when you look at these platforms, it can be difficult to compare them to very mature platforms that didn't necessarily have the best foundations. I'll say, like with Revit, for example, I wouldn't say that necessarily had the best foundations. A lot of the API and the code is very hard to work with behind the scenes, from what I know. But at the same time, I do appreciate they are being very, very careful and calculative with how they start off BlenderBIM, just under the understanding that I guess it will potentially grow into something that has to be quite well founded, because it is an open source movement, I guess. So it has to be pure to the core, I guess, because people will have access right down to the bare bones. So I think it's definitely, at the very least, even if it's not the future platform, it's definitely got people thinking in a different way. And I think that's maybe the most valuable thing that it will do, just to reframe how we look at software and process and collaboration and why we choose the platforms we do. Yeah, so I think that's maybe the most valuable thing it gives the industry, if anything.
And like I said, I don't know if by the end of this year, Dion will have a beta version. When it's going to be a beta version, that will mean that they actually will recommend, like, it could be used in production. Right now it's not recommended. Like, you need to learn Blender, like you said, right? That's not easy. Or it might be easy, but for a AEC professional, that's not the goal, to learn a new program to be able to use another tool, right? Like, it's learning two different softwares. That's not the aim. But now they try to build up on the most core concepts, and after that they will work more on the interface and make it more user friendly.
Sure, yeah. I think that's the right choice. You build the tools that the developers can play with, and then open it up to a more general user base in more friendly user interfaces and packaged elements that they can use. So I think they're doing it the right way. I think they're guarding it to some degree to make sure that it is, functional down to its core. So I do appreciate they are moving something very heavy, which is the AEC industry as well. You're not going to turn the industry around tomorrow or in 10 years or maybe even in 50. It could be a big movement they're starting here that's going to take a while to move. But I guess too, I also appreciate that probably the audience of such a platform is probably not going to be people like me. It's probably going to be like, new graduates that haven't used the platform before and actually can learn something in a particular way. Because like I said, I'm a bit of a prisoner to my own thinking, my own thought patterns that I've developed for 10 years. I can only turn them around so far before I go, oh, it's just too much easier to do it this way, even though I can't turn it into a valid IFC or something like that. So I know the limitations, but at the same time, I can still drive the product to a point that works for my clients. So that is my challenge. But I guess I have at least tried to make a lot of my students aware of these sort of these avenues that are available to them just before they go and dive too far into one platform or one way of thinking. So that's probably the biggest opportunity I see available for their target market. If they have one, I'm not sure if they have a very specific target market yet. I'm sure it's still quite broad. But that probably is maybe the early adopters, I guess, if anything, would seem to me to be students or graduates or potentially just Blender experts that want to put their skills together with something that can achieve an AEC output.
The thing is, like you said, using many different tools, like Blender BIM works very well, or Blender works with Ladybug, tools like Ladybug.
Yeah, I saw they've got an integration now for that.
I don't know if you are aware about, but there is also an add-on called Sverchok, which is an alternative to Dynamo, right? So you have all these
it's a visual coding tool. Svetchok is very impressive. I spent some time watching some of the content on it. Whilst I can't really use Blender very well myself, I do try to watch some of the learning content or the demonstrations that they do just to understand what it's capable of. So if I do meet someone that says, "Hey, I want to use Blender and I don't know how to use it," I say, "Well, if you like computation, go to Svetchok first, and you might find context in the tools that way." So it's very impressive what they've built on top of a very open engine to begin with. Like I do have to commend them. I can see a lot of passion in the project. Not just Dion, but other people really pushing away at the capabilities of that program. I think Blender itself was a really interesting programming movement of sorts in the first place. That really, and I'm sure you sort of told me that as well when we first spoke about it a while ago. You could already see the writing on the wall. So I think it's definitely a intriguing platform with a lot of different add-ons and concepts packaged in there that I really respect. So yeah, I think there's definitely potential there. I do wonder if maybe it might not just be really an AEC benefit, like AEC is sort of one very small piece of the puzzle that it unlocks. Like Rhino too. Rhino is really a platform that only serves maybe AEC as I'd say maybe 20-30% maybe is their client base. I'm guessing they have like jewelry designers and boat designers and all sorts of alternative markets that they're serving. And maybe Blender BIM might go beyond architecture and engineering and construction as well. It might represent something bigger.
I did not think about that. Since I
always wonder, because I guess like AEC is only a small part of the global production cycle. There's probably industrial design opportunities as well. Maybe not with the IFC component, but just that way of thinking of putting data in geometry in an engine that doesn't necessarily function as a metadata container originally. Like I've been using Rhino a lot lately with Rhino Inside. And one thing I do quite often is I pass Revit models through as very raw geometry, but then I inject all the data into the objects so I can cross-reference them between the two environments. And I essentially turn Rhino into a BIM environment where I can take advantage of the BIM data in an engine that can handle highly complex geometry and analysis, which Revit just would crash doing. So I see that maybe that might be another thing that Blender BIM exposes in a platform where data isn't necessarily the focus initially.
Yeah, we will see. First, the objective is to be a tool. I think, from my understanding, is to be a tool that people can use it professionally as well, and individuals as well. How good it's going to be, we will see. But this is the purpose. This is the goal, to have something, a free alternative. Aside of Blender BIM, there are other tools. I don't know if you are aware about other open source tools, but I had not long ago the founder of IFC.js, which is
okay, yeah. I think I watched a little bit of that one actually. I do remember hearing a little bit about that. It was quite intriguing. Just some of the integrations and the opportunities that the data scheme is finding in various platforms and ways of looking. I mean, I've looked at things like IFC OpenShell as well and different ways of handling the schema. And I think obviously, JS is a very promising environment in a lot of ways. Not just IFC, there's a lot of web focal integrations that I'm seeing in the industry. I mean, a lot of people use like Node.js, and they're trying to find integrations with our platforms, because obviously the sooner we can get all this data on the web, the more accessible it's going to be, and the easier it's going to be to connect all our projects. So yeah, there's definitely some interesting things it offers, and I am teaching my students that the future of data management is the web. There's no doubt about it. It has to be where our data is going to end up going in most cases. We're already seeing cloud platforms emerging. We're just not necessarily seeing clouds where everything works together. We're still seeing like data dumping environments, I think. Like BIM 360, for example, it's a bit of a data dump sometimes. But then we're seeing some people working on platforms that try to convert data types. I know there's a guy called Jonathan Egan. I'm not sure if you've seen his work before, but he's building an integration that I think is potentially sitting over Aconex. I forget the name of it. It's BIM Launcher, I think it was, where he's trying to get various file formats to communicate fairly openly with each other through data schema mapping and all sorts of black magic behind the scenes. So I definitely see that the future is going to be platforms that can essentially hold data in a more contained way, a federated way. I guess the federated model is no longer just a big Navisworks model dumped out at the end of the project. It's something more meaningful, which then leads to a meaningful digital twin opportunity as well, I guess. That's where I see the future of really, project setting. Well, still not there, but we're getting there.
Yeah. Another tool that I recently had the pleasure to, it was in the last episode actually, it's Speckle. Did you hear about Speckle?
Yeah, I've seen a little bit about Speckle. Yeah, it's definitely it's a concept I appreciate. I mean, the main context I've used it in is I've seen it used in Rhino and Grasshopper to essentially simulate a work shared environment between the web. So actually working on the same model through like across on the web that essentially sends commands back and forth between separate files to simulate a joint environment. And I see a lot of other uses for it as well, and essentially just passing data through the web to do various things on lots of ends of platforms that don't necessarily naturally connect to one another. I think it's very impressive. I think what they need, and what a lot of other platforms like them need, is a lower entry point for people to engage with the platforms. That's one of their challenges that I noticed, that sometimes you almost need to be a programmer to appreciate the beauty of what their platforms can really do. Sometimes it's hard for an everyday user to look at it and go, oh, I can see what to do with this straight away. You almost need someone to tell you, like, these are the things you can do with it. This is how it's going to save you time. And these are the skills you need in order to even consider using the platform. Like, you might need basic Python, you might need basic C++. There might be some programming requirements to get into it as well. Other platforms like HiPar as well, like they're similar. There's like an entry level that isn't necessarily for everyone. So I think that's probably just the main, I guess, challenge, I would say, those platforms face. And maybe those platforms are happy to have a higher entry point. Maybe they don't want everyone to use the platform. It's one of those things where maybe it's like you're either with us or you're not. Like that might be their mentality sometimes. Just because.
No, I don't think that. I believe it's the lack of
Speckle. I think
funding.
Speckle is pretty happy to let everyone follow them. Some platforms like HiPar, I think the narrative they spin is more like, you can come with us if you want, but we're not going to lower the capability of the software to make it easier to use. We're going to have to still, have a level of sophistication in the software that does require some technical capability to work with. And that's always a hard balancing act to manage in any platform, I guess. You can't lower the curve any lower than to keep the software functional, I guess. So that sometimes I notice that is one of the challenges with these platforms, I guess. But there's a lot that they offer. Yeah.
Is Hyper open source tool? I'm not. I don't know what we do.
I believe it's open source. I know it's not free, but I guess as we all know, open source doesn't necessarily mean open cost. So it's a subscription platform, and from what I can see, people are contributing native code to the platform. I'm not sure if the way that it's actually passing that code into the platform is open. I'll probably have to research that a little bit more to understand it. But it does receive a lot of different code schemas, I guess. I know there's a good connection I have called Wassam Yabi, who works at a place called Topologic. He's built his engine into nearly every platform I've ever seen. It's amazing how flexible his thinking is. And I know he's built an integration for Hyper, I believe. If not, he's definitely built one for Blender. I know he's been doing a lot of work with that. But I think he was potentially doing Hyper as well, which makes me think that the source must be at least exposed to some degree to be able to talk that deeply to it. So yeah, I'd be surprised if it wasn't open source, just based on the work that I see people doing with it and the depth that they're able to go to. But there's definitely like an entry level for that platform, in that you need to know some code to really contribute meaningfully towards it and get it to do what you want. Yeah, but it's definitely interesting. I will definitely check it out, and it might be worth trying to see if you can actually get Anthony Huack on here, the lead on that job. I've spoken to him before, and he's a deep thinker. I think he'd be really interesting to talk to about this, and he's got his own sort of opinions on the industry as well, on some of the challenges and the inefficiencies, and I think he'd definitely align with your thinking as well. So yeah, maybe one to look at in future as well.
Yeah, of course, of course.
Probably know, I don't know if you know all the people on the team there, but they've also got Ian Keogh, the developer of Dynamo. So they've got some pretty smart minds on there. And they've got a guy called Andrew Human, who's a really well-known Grasshopper developer. So yeah, there's some pretty interesting people on that job. It seems like they've got the right people, for sure. And now they're just sort of collecting the right users, and off they go from there. So it's an interesting movement for sure. It's definitely a movement. That's probably what I call it, not just the platform.
Yeah,
which is, I guess, what we need to really make things work. It can't just be a tool that we play with. It has to be a concept, a process, something different.
Yeah,
but there's a lot of interesting movements happening around in the industry right now, and a lot of interesting arguments, debates on Twitter about these sorts of things as well that I like to jump in from time to time. So it's quite interesting.
Yeah, for sure. I forgot to mention something. Last time I asked you something, not during the interview, but afterwards, I guess. What tool are you using for productivity or project management? And you told me Notion. I don't know how you are using Notion, but now my life, it's going through Notion. I don't do anything without running it through Notion. Everything is in Notion, you know? So I don't know how you use it. It took me some months to learn how to use it and to find a good system, because it doesn't have a built-in system already that you like other project management
use the
tools.
Free version or the premium version?
No, I have the premium
full
now.
Version, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, like, you don't have a fixed structure that you follow.
Yeah,
this is
it's
the
very
way
flexible.
You do.
Yeah,
exactly. And the flexibility, it's a plus and a huge minus for the beginners, because you don't know how to start. You don't know what is best.
Exactly.
So
the program almost demands the
iterations.
user has an organizational level in their head already structured, and Notion is just the canvas to put it on, essentially. That's how I approached it as well. So I don't use it as frequently these days, because I found I was getting a little bit too obsessed with Notion, in that, like you said, everything suddenly it's work, and then suddenly it's also YouTube, and then it's also personal, and suddenly you've got a board for everything. And I sort of found the contagion was serious. Like, you could really start organizing yourself to the point where you don't have time to do anything except organize your time. and I had to pull back a little bit. So I keep a lot of my high level management systems on there. So my future plans for YouTube, my collaborations coming up. So I keep a lot of scheduling on there. So when I've got things like podcasts, I usually store them on Notion just to remind myself of what's coming up. And I check it out usually on a daily or a second day basis, just to keep myself up to my speed. But I find I have a lot of sort of subtle subsystems in a lot of the programs I use that somehow just all seem to work together. So like with my business, like the first thing I did is I invented a very customized client and job numbering system just to keep on top of everything through like delimited data. And as a result, I could build some batch scripts just to auto file and auto retrieve files if I needed to for a particular job. So I have naming conventions for files. And as a result, I can actually draw on a lot of data very predictably and grab emails very easily if I need to look for them. And the same with my Outlook. My Outlook is heavily organized, almost like a little mini Notion board. There's a lot of folders, subfolders, filing rules for particular clients. So I sort of built a lot of those systems into my own programs as well. And I always recommend other people do that. If they're a technical consultant, there's almost no excuse not to build those technical systems into your workflows because you're sort of practicing what you preach. In that if you can't manage your own workflows, how can you manage another client's workflows, right? That's sort of like the thing. If your own house isn't tidy, then you can't really go and clean someone else's. So I think that helped me as well. But Notion became a more high level mechanism for me eventually because I was very granular. I was going to the point of putting things like invoicing structures on there just to find out what I wanted to build a fee up of, and now I just go on Xero and I build draft invoices, and so I store things in more direct ways, I guess. So I found Xero is brilliant. Like I remember before I used Xero, it was a nightmare. Just trying to stay on top of manual invoices, putting it all in Excel. It was ridiculous. But now most of that I just manage in Xero instead. But Excel and manual is just not the way to go. Any business, I recommend Xero day one, or MyOb, or whatever cost management platform you want to use.
Every accounting tool. There are so many nowadays, so it's
and they're not too expensive. They're like $50 a month, most of them, and that's pretty reasonable for what they do. So that's been great. Wix has been great for managing my store. Like there's a pretty good store integration behind the scenes, which lets me do a lot of marketing campaigns and also just track my finances there as well. And I use Stripe to put all my payments together in one place. So I found that sort of manages my admin for me. And then Notion has just become an ideas board, I guess, just to keep me on track, or just to put ideas down so I don't forget them later on, I guess. But I did used to be very deep on Notion, lots of checklists with tick boxes. And I find now it's more like a notepad, the way I treat it. Whereas originally I was putting little checklists on there and I was like 87% complete on this job because I'd finished 7 out of 8 tasks. And now I know where I'm at now as a sole trader. I just track myself and I have like a rough brief with the client, and that's usually how I track myself instead. So I've sort of pulled back to some more traditional methods in some aspects, just because I guess you sort of double up the effort if you try to capture it all in Notion as well. But I can definitely understand the contagion of organizing yourself to death, essentially in Notion. I know like there's a guy called Aaron Maller at Parallax as a consultant, and sometimes I see his Notion boards on Twitter and that they're intense. Like this guy's like, he's like the Notion king, I reckon. So I can see a lot of people do benefit from it. But just different ways of thinking, I guess, suit different quantities of different management systems. So for some of my systems rely on automation to some degree, I guess, but in that there's a bit of design and thinking that maybe, sometimes a board like Notion might capture more simply for someone that just wants to have a solution from day one and move on. Yeah. So, but I sort of enjoy designing those systems too. There's a little bit of insanity in there, I guess, in designing these crazy systems that no one would understand from the outside. But I guess on the inside they work. So yeah, which is definitely my filing system. Yeah.
I completely understand your point. And if you get to that point where you just need to use that tool to work for the sake of organizing things, so that's not good. I got into the same thing, like using way too much time to organize, and I could not get things done. So I zoomed out a little bit.
Yeah.
And what I do now mostly, what I use Notion for, is to capture ideas. Everything I capture, I put in there. After that, I process and organize those things, but I don't go very, very granular. And the last thing I do is to track things. I track my progress, but not like 1% or 2%. No, I run my daily routine through that with checkboxes every day. When I wake up, I have a template for a daily routine, and I just create new day right there and check the boxes I did or not. And at the end of month, I'm reviewing and see, did I train enough this month? Did I eat healthy? did I did all the other things that I had there.
I think that's a great way to use it, just to keep yourself balanced and in check. I knew a friend that used it, and he almost wrote his routine into it and never changed it, but he was failing every month to keep it up. And I said, well, use that as a sign to adapt your routine. Like it's a tool that's meant to also feed back to your own life, and it's meant to help you better shape your own regiment. And it's not just I failed, I didn't meet my goals, but I'll try again next month. It's more like, I'm just, I guess, being my own advocate, I guess, figuring out what works for me. And I think it was good for me to keep me in check to some degree, especially as a sole trader, because I don't have a partner in business that can tell me if I'm, way off track and I'm just wasting all this time somewhere. So it's good to have that tool that can say, hey, you wasted X hours last month just on not meeting X tasks, and instead you focus too much on this board or this area. It definitely helped me one month when I got very focused on YouTube, and did some consulting, but I could definitely see a notion that my productivity had definitely shifted in there. But then as a result, I didn't do any YouTube for the next 2 months because I built my schedule up so heavily. So it was an interesting way to sort of look at that give and take sort of relationship between the aspects of my life as well, sort of juggling those pieces and making it all work together.
Yeah, because if you organize it too well, it's becoming too daunting. Like you get to a point where you get burned out by doing that.
Exactly. Burnout's real. Yeah. I would say I burnt out easily at least twice in the last year, just through putting myself under too much pressure, or just over managing myself to the point where I was either working too much or wasn't working smart, and was sort of digging myself into corners and not having an escape route through managing myself more carefully. So I've definitely found a much more balanced way of holding it all together, and things like Notion definitely helped for sure. But just having a way to look back at yourself and critique yourself through those sort of tools, it's super valuable. So I'm glad to hear you've sort of found use in that as well.
I don't know if you read the book Essentialist.
No, I don't think so. Yeah.
I would definitely recommend you to read that book. It will definitely.
Send a link to me sometime with it. Yeah.
I'll do it. Check it out. It's very, very nice.
I've been meaning to read a new book lately, so that could be a good one to jump into. I think it's more sort of about personal and time and life management, or
yes, maybe. But actually, what is this about is how to focus on the things that matter, that can have the biggest impact, and instead of what do we do, what do I do, and what most of us do. We say way too much yes. Yeah, I want to embark on that project as well. I can do that as well. I can do that as well. And you end up doing a little bit in each project, a little bit here, little bit. Here, this book teach you how to focus on something that you just ignore everything else, take the thing that can have the biggest impact on your life, and do that, and you will go up like a rocket into the space.
That sounds actually like what I need right now. So that sounds like a great book. I must say I'm sort of proud and ashamed to say that I've responded to every single comment on YouTube so far. I don't have a single unanswered comment, and I also have never. I don't think I've ever ignored a Gmail from my YouTube as well. So there's definitely aspects of my life that I do need to layer that prioritization onto. I can see those aspects building up and going, okay, eventually I am just going to have to ignore people, and it's a real thing.
You get to a point now, as your YouTube channel is growing, where it's just impossible. Like, you will need to do only that all the time, and you cannot do that. You either will hire somebody to do that if it makes sense, but if it doesn't make you any money, so yeah, you need to check yourself.
Well, that book sounds actually very valuable on that basis. So I'm glad you recommended it, because I was actually thinking of pursuing something along those lines quite soon, just to motivate myself to be a little bit more mean sometimes.
It's a very, very, very good book. I read it last year during the pandemic time, when the pandemic started, and I'm reading it right now, and I'm going through it again. And it's I'm not only going through it, I'm also applying it. I try to focus on the things that matter most, and to cut the noise and focus on the most impactful things. I think we can round up. If there is some we forgot to cover, please.
Yeah, maybe the plight of the architect. I wouldn't mind touching on the open letter rhetoric there, and the challenge our industry is facing.
Do you want to share the screen and go to the article?
I don't mind maybe just referencing. I might just reference the article, and then they can work from there. So I guess one last thing before we round up, having learnt some great things tonight about books I can read and some things going on in your side of the world, there was an open letter I think I referenced earlier that I directed back towards architects in response to their Autodesk focused letter. And I wasn't necessarily defending Autodesk, but I guess I was sort of questioning architects' integrity as well as a profession. Especially from an inward perspective. So how do we behave competitively towards each other? Because a lot of the rhetoric they used in the letter to Autodesk actually referenced things like anti-competitive behavior and things like that, non-transparency and the open nature of our industry. Well, not really. Is a good example of maybe that we're really just sort of pointing fingers in the wrong direction, and we need to begin by fixing some of the challenges we're facing, which might then give us more focus as an industry to actually look at the outward facing problems as well.
Yeah.
So one of those big problems which we see in Australia is the fees are very low on projects for architects because we spend so long trying to lower our fee to win the project. And that's the only competitive edge a lot of companies give the client. And often that's the only competitive edge the clients care about too, because of what the industry has turned itself into. That I guess that's one of the things that I'd want to see. Yeah, exactly. Race to the bottom. So I was sort of questioning whether there's a need for like a regulator just to step into the industry, like our architectural associations that are meant to represent our industry and regulate the fees and say that you shall not go lower than X on a project of this value, or this is just the fee that you go on based on project value. It's just a given rule. And your competitive edge when you're bidding against someone is just based on your value add from a design perspective, from a cost management perspective for the project budget, but you still go in on the same fees. You're not competing on the basis of price. But sort of like how architects used to work, I guess. Say go back 200 years, 300 years, we were craftsmen. We were guiding craftsmen in a project. We weren't necessarily just saying, I'm 10 stones cheaper than that guy, so go with me. They were saying, look at this amazing design that I can draw for you, and this is what we're going to do for you. It's a different way of sort of framing, what makes architects valuable. So I sort of question in the article whether we need, someone really to step in and just crack the whip on us. And I know engineers have similar challenges when they're bidding against each other on projects, and what do they define as their competitive edge and their competitive value, and sometimes cost is the biggest thing, I guess, that the companies use to outbid each other or underbid each other, I should say. So I think that's a huge problem that I guess I'm hoping we see some movement on quite soon before the industry digs itself, so deep that we just can't build our reputation out of that hole that we've dug. And then, things like software licensing might not look so expensive, I guess, once we have reasonable fees that we can justify to our clients. And using our software in more creative ways is obviously a way to make that fee more justifiable as well. If we return efficiency to the client, obviously we're working more efficiently, but the client's getting better results for the money they pay as well. So I'm noticing that sometimes the quality is also going down of the service that clients are given because the fee's so low that the firm can't afford to give them high quality service. So sometimes it's not even in the client's interest to have low fees in the industry because they don't really get what they paid for. That they get, promises, but not necessarily results, I guess, out of it. So it's just a sort of a way to look back at our industry rather than just point fingers at Autodesk and other big companies that are actually quite successful and making a lot of money because they do have, intelligent business practices, and they know how to work. They know how to get clients to do what they want and work with them in ways that are beneficial. Sometimes beneficial for both parties. I'm not saying Revit's the best program in the world by any means, but just that they do know how at least to market and to do it well, and also to set up a business that I guess covers unique services that aren't necessarily just marketed on the basis of low cost. I mean, I think we'd agree most Autodesk products and services are definitely not marketed on the basis of low cost. So it's just it's interesting to watch the architects, I guess, point the finger at a business that if we had the business model of, we wouldn't be writing open letters for. We'd just be laughing to the bank and saying, we don't need to write a letter, everything's great. So I sort of wrote the letter just to sort of poke a bit of fun at that challenge that we're facing, and that maybe the solution comes from within, I guess.
If you ask me, it's a very naive thing to do. It's very naive to wait for a company that you are paying hundreds of thousands of dollars every year, or even millions in case of bigger practices, right? and that earns a few $billion every year, it has in revenue, right? To expect that they will just try to listen to some crying kids outside in the world.
It sort of came across that way.
If you want to do something, like if you want to change your life, what do? Do you go and write a letter to the bank or someplace to change your? No, you do something yourself. If you want to do something, either do something like find a project. Like now, it's very easy to get Blender BIM as an example because we know about it, right? But let's say Blender BIM is not there. Talk with the other 20 architectural companies, and instead of take 10% of that budget you pay annually to Autodesk and build a team. Build a team to build the software. Or throw 2% of that amount of money to Blender BIM and see where Blender BIM is going to be in 2 years.
And watch it grow. So that was sort of one of my arguments in the letter I made as well.
Can do, right? That is something that you can do.
Yeah, and that's pretty much one of my arguments I made as well, that you can't expect things to change if you don't actually, put any recipe into change with. If you're just doing the same thing and hoping it gets a little bit better each year, or if you just want another program to come along that's Revit but cheaper, you're not looking in the right place. Like I think my favorite quote that I put in there, because you've read my articles and I like putting little sayings and quotes in there just that sound cool. Like it's almost like the lines you use in a debate to have the tagline. And I said, Autodesk gave you the shovel, but you did the digging. So like it's sort of like, like we still made our own decision to put ourselves where we are as firms and an industry. So we can't necessarily expect the people that made the shovel, to go and make us a better shovel that's just going to dig us even deeper or dig us sideways. We need to climb out of the pit to really solve our problems. Come on, let's be honest. It's hard, isn't it?
They like any other business. It's not like Autodesk is a devil. Like if they weren't there, maybe our industry would have not been so advanced with the tools, right? They have a huge contribution, positive contribution, right? But it's your fault, my fault, that we choose to have a dominant product in our lives, in our industry, right? We should invest. If you don't invest some time,
is like they've lost their way. They've sort of lost their way in some aspects, but they definitely have made some really big contributions. I mean, even like the integration of IFC into architecture. I know that they were a very early collaborator in that area, even though they haven't necessarily seen it through in all their platforms now. And DWG as well. They were huge in that process of establishing a more or less open drawing format as well. So there's definitely a lot that they've contributed. So I do find it frustrating when I do see companies or individuals saying, Autodesk is the enemy, they're terrible. It's like, they're a corporation. I mean, there's always going to be challenges with a corporation. So yeah, exactly. Yeah. So if it's that bad, then walk away and try something else. Because I mean, I have seen some firms trying BriskCAD BIM as an alternative. I believe HOK might be using it from what I've heard from a few people. No one from HOK, so I don't know if it's true. But I know at least they've got from what I've heard, they've got a department of users that are trying that on projects to escape the Autodesk ecosystem to some degree. So there's definitely some firms that seem to have walked in the right direction. One thing I really noticed on the open letter as well is it was all architects, and I was like, why didn't they let engineers talk as well? It would have been a lot more meaningful to capture the aspects of AEC.
Doing the work, the law.
Too focused inwardly. So my point was we're so focused inside the industry that we sort of lose that bigger picture sometimes as well, and then we think it's just all about Revit, and it's like, well, actually, there's a lot of other programs out there as well. And like the engineering features in Revit are even worse than the architecture ones. So, there's so many ways you can look at the problem. And I felt like they picked such a narrow perspective to look at it through that it almost reflected how I guess lost architects have become in BIM and just the modern business practices that they exercise. So, and there's lots of great firms out there. I'm not saying architects are all terrible. Just that on average, I find most companies don't understand how to be competitive anymore, or how to be creative or innovative or disruptive or take risks. They seem to follow the pack rather than lead new concepts. So hopefully there's more firms that are willing to take risks on those new platforms rather than just write letters and wait. I guess is sort of what I saw their strategy as being. We'll send you a letter and then we'll just sit here and keep doing what we're doing, and hopefully you'll come and solve our problem for us with all the money that you've made out of us. And I don't think that's going to happen somehow. So
that's something like if you don't take action for a change, for a thing to happen in the way you want it to happen, somebody else will decide for you. That's going to happen. Like, if you want
Exactly,
to change,
yeah.
you need to decide for yourself. Don't wait for somebody else, because somebody else will decide for his own benefit, not for your own.
Yeah, exactly. I do sort of wish, like with the open letter, I feel like they missed a big opportunity as well, that it could have been worded more like a threat and less like a whine. I think it would have made much more meaning and impact as a threat, saying that we as an industry will choose platforms to move towards collectively, like whether it's on a joint venture project or we're just going to all unanimously say, let's all move away from X program to Y program and see if we can move that hard. It would have had a lot more meaning, I think, in that case. They're then just saying, oh, we wish Revit was better and we wish that it used more processes. And it's like, you're limiting your vision so much here to a small vision. So hopefully we'll see some more meaningful dialogue come of that. But I guess too, I have as a result of that letter, I have got to see some more things from Autodesk, which obviously I can't go into full detail because non-disclosure agreements, etc. But I have seen some positive movements that letter did at least seem to accelerate behind the scenes. Things that we haven't necessarily seen yet. Some things we have, such as some slightly improved IFC compliance out of the export. But there are some quite exciting things I think we might see that might actually give Revit a fair bit of relevance, hopefully, for a while longer. But at the same time, I do appreciate that I think there's definitely a need for more, I guess, programs that can interoperate. That is one challenge I think we're always going to face with Revit, that you can't just import an IFC easily and get it out easily. It's still quite a difficult process. So but there's some things coming that might potentially give it a bit more merit. And I mean, it'll never make the openBIM community happy for sure. They're never going to be happy about Revit, and I understand why. But maybe it might slightly improve some collaboration between other platforms, hopefully.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that was an interesting little
yeah.
I wrote. Yeah.
You said is BricsCAD or BricsCAD? BricsCAD.
Yeah, BricsCAD. Yeah.
BricsCAD.
I call it BricsCAD sometimes by accident, but because we have a BIM community called BrisBIM here, so I always just sort of just naturally in my head, I think BrisCAD when I say it, but I know it's BricsCAD. Yeah. So yeah, I tried it out myself recently actually, and it was interesting. It felt more like a CAD program than a BIM program to me. That was probably my main criticism of it. I think it's got the promise and the potential to grow into a fairly competent BIM program. Like I saw things like components that could host themselves to walls and features that BIM platforms need. But then I saw other things that were more challenging, like sheets and views didn't behave in a way that I was used to, in that you sort of had to manually sort of set those things up. But I could definitely appreciate that I was seeing something that could definitely grow to fairly compete fairly with a lot of other platforms on the market, I think.
But listen, what I want to point out is that actually, what if BricsCAD or BricsCAD becomes as big as Revit? What do you think is going to happen then?
Yeah, it'll probably be another Revit. It'll close itself off, and yeah, so I mean, it's already it's not the cheapest platform already. It's already $1,500 a year or something like that. So it's not necessarily a solution, I think. So I agree. I'm not necessarily going to throw myself too hard at these platforms, even ArchiCAD too, because they're exhibiting some of the same challenges that closed BIM has in common.
Do you start seeing?
So if something comes up like Blender BIM, but with more tools in it, then I'm all for it.
Not only Blender BIM. What I'm trying to highlight here is that why the open source is the way. Like look at the IT industry. Just look a little bit at it.
Oh yeah.
How
they went pretty much open all the way.
Everything is like the best tools are free. Everything is free. Everyone has access to.
I mean, you look at Visual
it.
Studio. I like to use Visual Studio as the best example of just a program that opens up a source like as deep as you want to go. Essentially, like you can develop your own applications on top of an engine. It's pretty amazing what the IT industry has done. I mean, Windows was way ahead of their time. They were even ahead of Autodesk in the way they thought about their respective industry. They essentially invented their industry from the ground up almost. So yeah, there's definitely some things we can learn. I think the challenge is just the level of skill that we're seeing being taught to people. Maybe isn't necessarily going to align with what those platforms demand from an open source perspective. I think that we're going to see a lot of simplifications coming onto those programs eventually, and that will maybe be the way that people get encouraged into the open source movement. In that they won't all be programmers. Some of them might be drafters, some of them might be detailers, they might be coordinators, and that's the challenge that they'll face, I guess, and how long that means they can keep the source open for with maybe minimal funding. So there's a lot of challenges, but I highly respect people that are keeping their source open and trying to keep those projects moving. So I'm all for one. If it seems to be the one that could fill the gaps with what I do currently, I'll definitely be on it.
Yeah, but this is the nicest thing about open source, right? Nobody can just close the project and say, yeah, I want to increase the fee or something. That's not going to happen. Like, everybody needs to agree. Everyone develops together a platform that everyone can use and benefit from. That's the nice part.
Yeah, and one thing I really like about it, one thing I really like about it is it's very hard for an open source program to be bought out as well. That is one thing I do appreciate about them. It's very hard for a corporation to come and just buy it and close it off and say, bad luck, it's gone, because you at least had that program at that point. And someone else can say, well, you know what, you go and ruin it. I don't care. I'm going to keep it going on my side. So there is that beauty with open source that I appreciate. One challenge we see with companies like Autodesk is that they acquire most of their platforms and close them off. Even if they were open to some degree, they get closed off pretty fast. Whereas open source, it's quite difficult for that to happen. So it does maintain a little bit more integrity than the closed platforms ever could. Through the resilience of the community that supports them. So I do appreciate them from that perspective as well. But I have also come to appreciate the sort of the open closed format where you have things like Dynamo, which are very open in how we collaborate using it, but attached to closed platforms. So it's more like an open facet of a closed system. And sometimes I find that can be a very effective way to sort of get people thinking in an open manner or behaving in an open manner, even if they're not necessarily the developers themselves. And that gets them sharing workflows, and that's been a really interesting sort of open source concept. I think Dynamo is technically open source as an engine, but I guess it gets attached to things that are closed source in nature, talking to closed APIs and things like that. So yeah, there's many ways to go about it, I guess, and lots of challenges that come with every business model you can follow, I guess.
Yeah, thing is, the bottom line, the conclusion here is that we generally, as an industry, we need to open our views a little bit. We are too conservative, and that's why we don't communicate well. That's why that's why everything like this happens. And if we want to change something, like, we need to contribute. Like, don't expect for an alien to come and change your industry. Like, if you
don't wait for someone else to solve the problem you've got right now. Yeah, yeah. That's how I tell people that. But that's why I like things like scripting as well, because if you're trying to solve a problem right now and you know how to program, you can solve it yourself. You don't have to wait for the program to build in a feature or whatnot. And I guess open source is the same concept. You can build your own features, essentially. You can architect your own program to be what you need it to be. So that's why I try to teach people programming. So I feel like that opens their mind up to these types of concepts as well. In that, you don't have to wait for feature Y and version whatever to come and save the world for you. I get a lot of people in my channel, they come to me and say, I want to do this, but I don't want to use Dynamo. And I'm like, okay, wait. You're essentially asking the programmers to do it for you. So enjoy, just sit around and see what happens. But I guess programming is a way to bypass that challenge, or to just find alternative methods, I guess. So I guess that's helped me think deeper about the value of an open source approach as well. It's just that barrier of entry. That's always the biggest challenge I think that it's going to face in whichever program it is. That open source does require some degree of technical experience to pilot and integrate and develop, and yeah.
Yeah, and a lack of a library of videos or tutorials or something like.
Yeah, initially for sure, that's definitely a challenge. Yeah.
But this is something that will get addressed at some point by different tools. So, but it's something very important, right? But it's very important at least to raise awareness about this and see that it might be possible. Okay, it might be in 2 years or 5 years, but I'm sure something will change. Because
it could even be,
it's catching up.
It could be in 100. This might be the start of a very big journey for the industry. Potentially, we might only be looking at the tip of the iceberg right now, for all we know. But I guess we started it, right? That's the thing that matters. So you have to start somewhere, and you have to start that journey at some point. So, or we could be looking at 4 out of 5 years of a journey, and there's a shadow organization that's going to emerge next year and just surprise everyone. You never know. There's a lot of stealth startups at the moment that I can see.
Yeah,
I think every probably 10th to 15th connection I get seems to either have worked at a stealth startup or they're working at a stealth startup right now. So there's a lot of interesting things that we can't see yet that might somehow relate to this as well, I feel. Because a lot of companies know that whilst they might develop something open, they want it to be closed, at least from a an awareness perspective until they can get it to a point they're happy with. So that might be the other business model, I guess. On top of that, the closed open source, or the initially closed open source. Yeah, it's an interesting time to be in the industry, put it that way. And I think it's been great that you've been raising awareness for this as well. I really do commend that you've really given a lot of people a platform here to share those open ideas, and even if it's not an open platform someone talks about, it's an open concept or an open idea, an open workflow. It's at least the idea of sharing and communicating is just so valuable to moving things forward. So it's been great to see you give people that stage.
Thank you, man. I really appreciate this feedback.
Yeah, it's been great to catch up as well too, actually, and just sort of revisit what we spoke about last time and sort of see how our mindsets have shifted. I feel like I've probably become a little bit more open, and you've obviously seen some things develop in your side of the world and your career as well. So it's been good to sort of rebalance our perspectives a little bit. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it.
Yeah, me too. It was a heck of a conversation, man, and I'm really looking for the next one.
Yeah. Oh, I'm always open to more. Like maybe in about another year we can tee up again and see what's changed. Who knows? Maybe I'll be developing BlenderBIM by then. Who knows? You never know where we'll be. Could be. I mean, it's life takes us to funny places.
That is an existing parallel universe already, Gavin. You know.
I guess it has to be, right? If you believe in the concept of an infinite universe, then I guess somewhere I've developed BlenderBIM, I'm sure.
It's happening.
But I'm not going to take away Dion's thunder. That's all Dion's. I don't want to take it away from him. I respect what he's doing.
You don't need to take him. You can help him.
Yeah. No. He's doing great work. I respect what he's doing, and I respect his tenacity as well. I think that's one thing I've always appreciated from Dion. He's got strong tenacity. He doesn't take no for an answer. If he doesn't agree with something, he'll let them know. Yeah, and I think we need that too. People need to be more confident with expressing their opinions, even if it's not always the thing that people want to hear. If it's the thing they need to hear, that's something that's quite valuable too. Completely
agree with that. Thank you very much for taking the time, man.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Really nice.
It's been great. Great to talk, and I look forward to seeing future episodes of BIMvoice in future, and we'll stay in touch, no doubt.
Yeah, sure. Good luck with everything you do.
Oh, thanks very much. Likewise. Hope the project goes well, and yeah.
Thank you. Good night.
I wish you a speedy recovery as well. Yeah.
Thank you, man. I will be fine. I'll be fine. Slowly, but
you look very well now, so it's good to see you. Yeah.
Thank you.